Region, day number 2 broadcast of week 3. We are getting ready for our first series of the day, which is Group B's initial match, Muzzy versus Monsanto. So we'll be taking a look at their deck list, which is already a slight variation of what we saw yesterday in terms of the ban strategy. Muzzy will be left with Paladin, Shaman, Druid, the 3 core classes, which I think a lot of people are leaving up after the bans, as well as Mage. Monsanto, on the other hand, has the traditional 4 that Muzzy has left up with Hunter instead. And so I believe we were told that we're going to start things off with Muzzy's Paladin as our T-Mobile deck spotlight of the day. And, Paladin's been seeing a lot of play. We talked a little bit about it looking at Saiyan's deck list. However, it seems like Muzzy's has a lot more mid-range meat to these bones.
It does, yeah. You can see that he's got like Escape Mana Saber and Bone Wraith, which are situational. I was actually climbing with this deck today, interestingly enough, before I knew that it was going to be the T-Mobile deck spotlight.
Whoa.
And
from Bronze 10, TJ?
I think I made it, maybe I'm Platinum now, I think. I'm not sure.
I'm just messing with you because it's the beginning of the season. So
yeah, I know everybody's bronze 10, and then I didn't finish high enough in Legends, so I have a 10-star bonus because I finished like 3,000 or something like that. I don't have the 11 star. Well, the 11 stars. Just going on a tiny tangent here, 10 seconds. The 11-star bonus is like hidden behind some like invisible, crazy MMR value. It's not based on where you finished last season. It's based off your MMR from multiple seasons. I don't know. But I have 10. I'm not good enough for 11. But it was performing pretty well, honestly. The only problem is that you have like one of 2 ways that it can go. You either get all of your early game stuff, and then if any of it's dealt with, you're just out of cards on like turn 6, turn 7. Or you get all of your situational late game stuff like Libra of Justice, Waste Warden, Pharaoh's Blessing, and you don't get a board early enough to capitalize on the buffs that you have in hand. And you just get steamrolled because you have no comeback mechanic outside of very specifically Libra of Justice or Consecration, or secondarily Zephyrus. So you really need to like hit the ground running and then curve out in order to have good chance against some tier 1 decks. Now Muzzy will likely not be going up against tier 1 decks as long as he does his bans correctly. So his ability to curve out will be improved by the fact that he's playing other decks that may be of similar power level. And but I did like this deck, and it seems honestly quite flexible. And Surveillance of Sands has quickly become one of my favorite cards because it changes the way you play on turn 2, and that changes every game. Like getting hero power, Demon Hunter or Rogue hero power means that you can play for tempo a lot more, things like that. But pretty fun deck overall.
Yes, I was half hoping that you would start the Kappa Pasta when you're like quickly becoming one of my favorite cards, because it's just so positive and generous. It gives you a new hero power if you're able to play it on curve, and then, like you said, it changes the play pattern of a lot of stuff. Yeah. So we'll see what happens in game number 1. Here we go: Highlander Paladin versus the Spell Druid Monsanto. We'll get his webcam up shortly.
Yep.
Thank you, Peanut Gallery. Let's go into game number 1. Muzzy, starting with an aggressive mulligan, trying to get that curve going, finds a defensive strategy, so to speak. I guess the Consecration is great against the early game board presence of your opponent if they're playing more aggressive. However, Monsanto has the Fungal Fortune, and he's going to be looking for ramp as well as additional card draws. Eventually build up those giant boards with Chaos Thoughts and Mount Cellar, and of course, everyone's favorite Glowfly Swarm.
Yeah, we'll see. Muzzy has limited tools to deal with the wide board states, like I mentioned. Monsanto does have the like more defensive version of the Spell Druid deck that cuts some of the board reload and plays bees instead. He has 1 Mount Cellar, and then the 2 Glowfly Swarms, and a single copy of Soul of the Forest. So like his ability to build boards is a little bit less than, say, the versions that run the double Mount Cellar, double Soul of the Forest, or Forest Aid, that type of thing. But because Muzzy is limited on the wide board removal anyway. I think it should be enough as long as he doesn't get run over in the early game. Because I just don't think Paladin has, the Highlander Paladin has like the chops to go toe-to-toe once the Druid kind of hits its stride. And because that's the case, yeah, I like the fact that Muzzy is going to go for early tempo, early aggression to try and force Monsanto into maybe more awkward plays and delay his ability to go wide on board in this game.
Yeah, and I think that is a great point. You know, Muzzy trying to capitalize on one of Druid's main weaknesses, which is that early game board presence that it lacks. It tries to remove and play defense, and that's where Bees really comes in. Monsanto has the opportunity to play Bees right now, or can play a little bit greedier and choose to save it later. But I like Bees on curve here. Muzzy also kind of introduced with an interesting option, right? Because oh wow, hold on, now it gets really interesting. Particularly because Muzzy has a few different ways he can choose to go about the board. No matter what, he's obviously going to play minions here. It's just that, you know, when he had the Zephyrus line, he didn't have history buff, so he was trying to curve out with Animal Companion, but now he's picked up a curve Synth. So how does he adapt?
I think it's just put the most power, most consistent power on the board, right? Every turn.
Yeah, well, I mean, Animal Companion was more power, but History Buff has more latent power. It actually gets much stronger as you just continue to play more minions.
Yeah,
because, you know, obviously Animal Companion can get you more immediate damage now, or just put a 4/4 on the board. So I do like this. I do like the History Buff a lot. It's also intimidating because Druid doesn't have the easy removal for it, but Monsanto has the Bog Beam ready, so he could end up just removing this History Buff. It seems like he's going to first draw the cards, or he's leaning towards it. I feel like either way, he's removing this history buff. If he chooses to use his Fungal Fortunes, he would either have to pick up Wrath, or he would have to use his Innervate or some of the other spells like Fire. And with Kael'thas in hand, it makes me feel like I want to hold on to Fires and Innervates.
Yeah, that's... But I mean, also there's merit to holding on to Bog Beam in that situation too. Ooh!
Yikes.
So now with Mount Stiller gone, Glowfly Swarm is like the only minions, essentially, outside of Rising Winds that Monsanto can create. Which might be slightly worrying, but I guess with Zephyrus gone, it's not the biggest of deals. And Muzzy's just disappointed now that all this work that he put into this early board has gone away.
Right.
With, Monsanto being able to clear.
And it makes sense that Monsanto was wanting to full clear because, again, this is the hardest part for him to survive. And while he would benefit from keeping all these cards and making them like the most sick Kael'thas Sunstrider turn, Monsanto says, you know what? I've played enough scenarios where sometimes you pop off with Kael'thas and die anyways because you just took a little bit too long to get set up and you're losing half your life. So this is a preserve health line of play, and I like it.
Because this gives him flexibility now to kind of have dead turns and not worry about just getting over a run on the board. This board is not particularly threatening right now. It's only 4 damage, but the more Muzzy adds to this, the more threatening that Leok becomes. But Monsanto does have an insane Kael'thas turn lined up if he holds onto all these cards. And at the same time, he also can't really remove much, even if he wants to spend these cards, right? Bog Beam would be able to kill the Beaming Sidekick, or Moonfire, if that's the case. He wants a hero power. But that's not taking too much power off the board for the long term. This Leok will be the more threatening minion once, again, Muzzy starts adding additional minions to the board.
Here we go. Sir Finley of the Sands. What does it offer? The Odd Paladin hero power, Silverhand, summoning 2 recruits is problematic for Druid as long as Leok lives. Summoning a totem of his choice is also interesting, just because I think that hero power is underrated with how annoying it can be. You're summoning stuff, which is obviously difficult to deal with, but you can, like, for example, stack spell power totems and just make this consecration hit like a truck. I do agree with the paladin, the odd paladin hero power here of the Silver Hand. However, it was just interesting to think about the possibilities of using the totemic slam and being able to get the ideal totem of your choice if you didn't have this board building Silver
Hand. If only totemic slam let you choose a totem, and then it was also a beefed version of that totem. Like, it had +1 health or something along those lines. I don't know. Totemic Slam was always the hero power that I wanted to make work back in the Baku and Gen days, but I could never find a way. Kind of similar to Totem Shaman now, where sure you can spend 2 mana getting a board full of spell power totems every turn, but your opponent can just kill them for free as long as you don't have tempo. Yeah, Monsanto again in a situation where these spells in his hand are going to be very valuable going into next turn because of the Kael'thas, but because he has 4 and he can play all those 4 spells next turn with Kael'thas plus Overflow, he still has enough to get the job done, and he wants to try and preserve that health total. So next turn he goes Kael'thas, Innervate, Ironbark, Overflow, and then kind of goes off, or any combination of those spells, just not the damaging one, obviously, because of he does not want to heal his opponent's stuff with Overflow. But he has the full draw with Kael'thas, and then we'll have the full mana reset once again to be able to play, say, a Glowfly Swarm should he pick that up.
Okay, so then how does Muzzy best set up for it? It's very clear that Monsanto's been dumping and saving up cards for a 7 mana crazy board swing. Escape Mana Saber and Hero Power looks very clean to me. And also surprisingly wide board, One of those things about the Silver Hand that people may have forgotten because Gen and Baku rotated very early in the life cycle of the Witchwood is just how intimidating it is to constantly remove a big board. And Leok is kind of really proven his worth here. It's hard to remove and makes all of these 2/1s, which makes Glowfly Swarm way worse. Not to mention there's Consecration, so even if Monsanto got Gift of the Wild, there would be an opportunity to clear, potentially here.
Energy, power. My people are addicted to it.
Alright, well here we go with Kael'thas turn.
Right. Kael'thas into the Ironbark. He has at least 1 more free spell, potentially more.
Okay, there's the Glowfly Swarm. He would need an Innervate in order to be able to go again. Alright, so it's going to stop at a Glowfly Swarm, and honestly, that doesn't feel like it's enough.
Time waits for no one.
Yeah, part of it was what we're talking about. Monsanto didn't have the ramp, so he didn't really have a lot of cheap spells to combo here. How big is this Power of the Wild potentially if Muzzy didn't, because he has a Consecration?
Yeah. Well, this Kael'thas still has 13 health, so Consecration plus the board is 12 damage. So he would have to Consecration and Underline Angling Rod in order to deal with this board, and that's a full trade of Muzzy's board as well. He could develop the Brazen Zealot behind it because he'll get the extra mana crystal from the Escape Mana Saber, but he would essentially use most of the resources in his hand, and then also only have a 2/1 left on the board once everything was said and done. So sure, he has the answers to this, but then he'll be super light on resources, and Monsanto, albeit a small reload, does have a reload.
Move quickly.
And I say small, but small based on its potential, not based on its actual stats.
Well, that's the thing, though. He saw that Mount Seller got... he saw that the Mount Seller got discarded from Fungal Fortune. So Monsanto's reload potential is actually a lot weaker than most druids in this position. So now Druid doesn't have things like the Forest Aid, doesn't have Ysera Unleashed. His best board building after this second round of Glowfly Swarm is Rising Winds. Believe it or not.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, and excuse me, last turn. I thought it was a full trade, but I must have not counted the actual Consecration damage on the Kael'thas, so he had the 2 attack left over. So he got to hold on to his Leok, which could end up being a difference maker, honestly. And I also like the fact that Monsanto, realizing that the Glowfly Swarm is his last form of minion generation, trying to protect it and go for needs to go super wide and try and get like the Soul of the Forest down and protect as much as he can. But honestly, like it is relatively protected by itself because Muzzy is out of removal. I mean, you look at his deck; he's used his Consecration, and he used his Zephrys. He has a Waste Warden left in the deck, and that's his only ability to deal with the second Glowfly Swarm.
Right. I mean, the other side of it would be to set up a board preemptively, and that's where the Silverhand Hero Power really does come into play. And he still has another Murloc off the Angler Rod that he could potentially get as a swing. Also, the Pharaoh's Blessing might end up being very hard for Monsanto to deal with, but he does have that Gift of the Wild, so I can kind of see this map out in a couple of different ways here. Muzzy just going for 4 full board development. And because Monsanto has to play a lot more Honesty without a free Kael'thas.
Whew.
Jeez, all the ramp at the bottom of Monsanto's deck. Feels bad for the Druid, but Monsanto still has that Glowfly Swarm and the Soul of the Forest. The question is he like potentially dead if he does not? Let's see. There's 4 damage from the Toxfin and then 2 from everything else. So it's 14. 17 through the weapon. 21 through the Pharaoh's Blessing. So he's not dead.
Well, there's a Blue Gill Warrior. And with Leok, it would be 3 damage.
Right. I mean, there's a handful of ways he could die.
Yeah, but I imagine that Monsanto will go for probably a play like Glowfly Swarm, Soul of the Forest, and then Bog Beam. One of these minions down. Probably the most attack, which would be the Toxfin.
Right.
Over there to the far left. So that's what's probably going to happen. And in that case, I don't think there's an out from the underlying Angling Rod.
Right. And keep in mind that Monsanto still doesn't actually have teeth besides the Gift of the Wild here. He doesn't have Savage Roar.
Yeah.
And he could whiff on the 50-50 here.
Yeah, that's true. He has Wrath to draw for 1.
That's true.
Also Rising Winds. And Overgrowth. Okay, well...
I guess you're supposed to just Pharaoh's Blessing here?
Yeah, and then...
Put it on the Magic Carpet, I presume? Guess you swing with the weapon first, see what happens. You might get some big impact Murloc. Oh, the Murloc Raider. Sweet. I mean, it's a 1-mana rusher.
1-mana rusher.
And beggars don't get to be choosers.
It'd be better than like a Scargill in this situation, because it would just be a 4/4 that had no immediate impact on the board.
Oh, interesting. Muzzy values the Magic Carpet slightly higher. I guess because he still has 1-drops in his deck. I just value the Leok largely because it makes all the hero power tokens become a little stronger. But actually, there's not that many 1-mana drops left. There is the Battle Mage, and there is the Og Merchant.
Yep, and Hungry Crab.
Oh, yes, the Hungry Crab. Okay, so 3 out of the 17 draws.
Yeah.
Highly reasonable. Okay, so Savage Roar drawn. Monsanto does not have lethal this turn. What can he do to make this better?
What is the last card in the deck?
Well, Monsanto only has one copy of Soul the Forest.
Yeah, so it's not Soul.
Only one copy of Wrath. Only one copy of Gift of the Wild. So it's got to be like the second Innervate. Or... yeah.
I'm out of cards.
Power of the
Second
Wild.
Power of the Wild. So he's going to use the Savage Word to get past the Leok.
Time waits for no one.
And then try and buff up his board from there.
Right.
Like the Rising Winds. Probably just 2 Rising Winds, honestly. Just make 2 Eagles and say go.
Exactly.
Try and follow that up with Gift of the Wild plus Power of the Wild for the final push.
Woo!
Ah,
Eddie Tyrion
jeez.
comes into play here.
Honestly, this probably has to be a Libra of Justice turn just to kill as much stuff as possible. He can kill off the 2 Eagles plus 1 of the Treants.
That's fair. And then Tyrion can try to lock the door. Remember that Monsanto is just like all in at this point. He has to try and make this board work. So Libra of Justice will eliminate 3 of these minions, making Gift of the Wild and Power of the Wild much worse. And Muzzy has all information available. He knows exactly what's in Monsanto's hand, which is 2 Overgrowths, 2 Power of the Wild, and a Rising Wind, and a Gift of the Wild.
Whew. I still like a decent amount of minion generation left for Monsanto, because he could do something like Rising Winds for 2 Eagles, then Power of the Wild for a Panther, and then a Power of the Wild for a buff.
Must move quickly.
So there's still a lot of minions to chop through, and it just seems like
Put your faith in the light. Reporting for duty.
I guess he wants to wait until Gift of the Wild comes out before Libra of Justice, but then he kind of overrides Ashbringer. Oh, but at the same time, see, I don't know, because he can't set up for like a lethal through Fatigue if Gift of the Wild ever comes out, because there's going to be taunts in the way. And then he won't have the Ashbringer anymore if he has to Libra of Justice through the Gift of the Wild turn, because then it would override the Ashbringer. So,
I think it's actually based off of one card, which might be... oh, actually, no, it doesn't work that way. We got correction that Wasteborn does not actually deal the damage to all Treants.
No, they're called Treants, but they have no tribe.
Right. So I was thinking that he would save the Libra of Justice in case he was able to top deck the Wasteborn, but it doesn't work that way. Then the alternative is... I guess he's just trying to get as much onto the board as possible, then use Libra of Justice later. And he still has a lot of opportunity to potentially draw like high-impact cards like a Siamat. But man, this is definitely intimidating board to go up against.
Yep. And Monsanto most likely... oh. So he left 1/1/1 up.
Interesting. Oh, Siamat!
Winds of the south.
Oh, wow!
That's what we're talking about. The Siamat was one of his outs.
Yeah, Siamat one of his outs because he gets to kill 2 of these. And 3 with the Ashbringer. And now this is a very limited amount of damage from Monsanto.
Reporting for
Almost
duty.
like as if he should have pushed that extra 5. Then his opponent would be at 7. Oh boy. Did Monsanto overthink it and overtrade?
Well, there was a card being held in hand for a very long time.
Right.
And I maybe Monsanto had a read that was Libra of Justice, because trading over one of the 1/1s still sets up lethal through Libra of Justice, because Muzzy would have had to tank the 5 and would have left 2 on board, which would have been 12, which Power of the Wild would have been enough in that point. But if Monsanto again doesn't trade off 2 of these minions to play around, or trade to 2 of these minions to play around Libra of Justice, then that card would beat him. So if he has the read, which I assume he does based on the one trade over the Silverhand recruit last turn, then he would.
Right. The argument would be that he can't afford to play around it, but I don't think we're at that point yet. Also, how do we play this Power of the Wild? Is it better just as a standalone 3-2?
I think just having more minions, honestly, is better at this point. Monsanto disagrees.
I think you have to push this damage, though. Can't trade with it. And Muzzy with the Libram of Justice. And the Og Merchant! What a draw!
What?
Are you kidding
Because
me?
that saves him the damage, so that Monsanto can't just hero power him over 2 turns to kill him.
Yep. And that's maybe it. Muzzy can't lose here at this point. Monsanto concedes. What a crazy game number 1. Highlander Paladin just narrowly out-survives the Spell Druid Onslaught.
Muzzy's pumped, and also I just realized that Muzzy has the same bottle as me.
Bottle buddies.
We're bottle buddies.
Yeah.
That just made me double happy. But yeah, Highlander Paladin taking the
2
win.
wins for Muzzy then.
I know, it's the double win. Well, honestly, just taking a win with Paladin in the series against the Druid is already a double win, I think, in my book, because what these series have been coming down to in most of the matches that we've seen so far has been which player can more consistently take wins with their weaker decks, which is Paladin and Shaman. And so if he's able to take a win over Druid with
A glimpse into behind the scenes. We're very transparent here at Hearthstone Esports. It's not just me and TJ doing everything ourselves. As I get to take a look at some of our producers at the back. In the meantime, we're going to get ready for game number 2. And Monsanto, with Druid, it's been struggling a little bit, but I did expect Paladin to win, TJ. I know that you were mentioning that it's kind of a huge victory here for Muzzy, but most of the expectation is that Shaman and Paladin will be able to pressure Druid enough to make it buckle. So Monsanto with the Druid probably had higher hopes for it, but at the same time, I don't think he should be that surprised. It just hurts because it was that close to winning the game. And as we mentioned, had he gone for the face for that little bit of extra damage, potentially would have swung enough. Obviously, I think that the math would maybe change a little bit because the Libram would clear off more, or perhaps the Siamat would be still as impactful, but kind of have to wonder.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't know. I still think that after playing it a lot today, the Highlander Paladin just still has a lot of weakness once their board is kind of picked apart and once they have to trade all in their stuff. Because as you saw, it very quickly becomes a game where you're relying on the top card of your deck, and as soon as you miss one draw, you're dead to a lot of the decks. But yeah, it's a big win against the Druid. And one thing that we also didn't talk about much was the fact that Monsanto left the Mage up for Muzzy instead of Hunter, which has been the more popular choice that we've seen, at least in Americas. In other regions, like in Europe, we see Mage left up a lot. We even saw a Rogue left up earlier today in Powell versus Seiko. And Seiko just got 3-0'd.
Yep.
Very quickly. And then they faced again. He banned Rogue and then beat him. So I don't know if that was a mistake or if he just underestimated the Rogue, but I saw in the chat earlier that Sottle and Raven were like, is that a mistake? Is the graphic correct? Is Rogue really left up? Yeah, but no Rogue in Americas. It hasn't been played a single time throughout the entire Swiss, and now throughout the top 8, Rogue has still yet to be played in this week's format. All right.
Well, it's okay. There's going to be other weeks where Rogue gets played, TJ.
Oh,
For
yeah.
now,
I mean,
it's the Shaman party.
Yeah, Rogue's just always played. In like every metagame, it always finds a way.
Death Tax is an Edwin Bank.
Mm-hmm.
Hungry Crab waiting for its time to shine. But not now. Muzzy has the board. And might be very important for Muzzy to have this board, so that way he can try to fight back later. I tend to believe that whoever... Oh, gosh.
Eesh.
I tend to believe that whoever is on the play is in a pretty big advantage in this matchup, just because you get to present first over your opponent. But it seems like, you know, when you're far-sighting into a mutate, that is not what you're looking for at all.
No.
A trade here would make the Mogu Flesh Shaper cost 6. Still too expensive.
The double Waste Warden tech from Muzzy. You can see what he's trying to target.
Yeah, it looks like he's going to go for the Mogu Flesh Shaper next turn, because chances are Monsanto is going to develop. He does find the Bog Strock Clacker.
Bless you.
Right, thank you. It's definitely a mouthful, but the most important thing is that Shield of Galakron stops the weapon attack. But Waste Warden actually gets some surprising value here. Oh,
and
or
now that's
perhaps
with Desert Hair, Mogu Flesh Shaper essentially still is the same cost, because it's 3 mana for 3 minions. So he can play Desert Hair, Sludge Slurper, the Lackey, and Mogu Flesh Shaper, and swing
it. Witchy Lackey, the evolves can keep on coming.
Yeah, I think you just save the Witchy Lackey and then get kind of a reroll evolve on whatever minion you're unhappy with.
Right.
Essentially. He also has Mutate. Okay. I guess the Mutate is to reroll for a minion that he's unhappy with.
Right.
Let's see what's in the box.
Finds a charge minion to take out.
Oh, charge. Yeah, I forgot. Charge exists.
Yeah, but these are all kind of weak stuff. What does he want to mutate? The Starving Buzzard or the King Feoris? I probably imagine the Feoris.
Yeah, we'll go to a Sea Giant, right?
We'll go to another 10-cost minion. So in this case,
another
it's the
10-cost minion.
Yeah, the way Evolve works is that there's nothing to evolve to. Because right now, there's no 11 mana cost minions in Standard.
What?
It'll just turn
10. Okay.
Yeah, it'll just turn into another minion of the same cost. So in this case, it'll turn 10 mana minion into a 10 mana minion. It also was a very unique case with Mountain Giant, because Mountain Giant was 12 mana. However, you do get the ability to transform that. And there was like this. There used to be this curve where you had Snow Fury Giant and be able to go from 10, 11, 12.
Yeah.
Definitely some brutal evolves here, but the good news for Muzzy, keeps his 10 drop on the board.
Sure. Yeah. Consolation prize.
I mean, that's a big deal. That's hard. It's hard to fight back from if you're Monsanto. You just a lot of tempo. And remember, the moment this thing becomes Deathwing, that just like is a 2-turn lethal setup. Alternatively, it could just turn into another King Feoris situation. One more time.
Zari.
He finds the Magma Rager. But Magma Rager is actually very... Oh, wow, he found the Galakron off the top. Is it fully invoked? It is. Funny enough, Magma Rager is like... tough challenges. You take that damage instead. Alright. All things considering, Magma Rager is one of the better outcomes, I suppose, if your opponent was having to attack into it.
Yeah, I mean, it's efficient damage for a 3-drop, I suppose. But now Muzzy has all of a sudden lost the board, and yeah, that's just the average outcome for the board that he had with how many evolves he had was so much higher than that. Like the Gnomish Inventor and the Starving Buzzard, just so understatic for their cost, and because Monsanto was able to clear off enough, because every single minion that survived there would have been a pretty big threat in going to the next turn. A threat's big enough to where maybe Galakron wouldn't have even been enough to deal with it. So
yeah, it's totally fair. On some level, I kind of think that this might be the reason why Shaman, even if it hits its power spike, isn't played much, because the consistency just isn't there. Perhaps because of the wild range of outcomes that you can get off your evolves. That volatility actually ends up becoming the sole reason why it may feel like you can't actually rely on this deck whatsoever.
Yeah.
Another big power spike in the form of Kronks. And Monsanto draws the Galakron, and Muzzy, with the lack of evolves getting him full tempo, he doesn't have the ability to fight back, and that's going to do it. Game 2 goes to Monsanto.
It's kind of crazy to think that after that turn that Muzzy had, that he still lost that game, but it kind of came down to just, one, obviously you can point at the evolved outcomes, but two, just Monsanto kind of having the board going into that turn, right? So he was able to keep the board in check enough to allow Galakron to be an out in that situation. So it was, he was facing up a board where he had a Shield of Galakron, the Disciple, the Devoted Maniac, and had to Blockshock Knuckles into it. So as soon as Monsanto was able to clean that up and dismantle at least most of like the 4/5 drops, it gave himself the Galakron out to be able to go. And that's kind of how swingy that Shaman Mirror can be, because once you go all in on your board, that's it. There's no comeback mechanics. Outside of Galakron, there's no way for you to instantly deal with the board. You don't have schemes or earthquakes or lightning storms or anything like that. So it kind of lives on the edge, right?
Totally. And I think that's ultimately the song and dance that we're going to be seeing a lot more throughout the weekend, right? Like we've talked about it a little bit. Shamans seem to be one of the more interesting classes, because while they do have some good matchups, they also seem to be kind of weak to everything at the same time. And it's kind of hard to predict based off of that. Like I thought that most times Muzzy wins those games, and I stand corrected. So maybe Muzzy will stay on the Shaman, try to see if he can still get a good matchup there, perhaps trying to see if he can aggro Hunter down, for example, and get that very fast evolve while pressuring. But at the same time, there is the opportunity for Monsanto to perhaps go for the Druid again. I think most people consider that Shaman to be very good against Druid. So if Monsanto anticipates Muzzy going for the Shaman again, he's probably going to have to switch something else.
Yeah, especially with the text that Muzzy has. He has double Waste Warden. So
double Waste Warden.
I don't think I'm playing Druid into this, knowing that there's a Shaman with double Waste Warden on the other side. Which is kind of funny to think that players in the past couple weeks have been queuing Druid nonstop against anything because of how it has a lot of good matchups. Now it has a good amount of bad matchups with Shaman and arguably Paladin. Murloc Paladin specifically. If you don't have early removal, you just get run over.
I guess Druid is fairly balanced then. Just has a pretty good mix of good matchups, even matchups, and some pretty bad matchups, and it's not infallible, despite it having ridiculous draws at times.
Yeah.
Well, Dwarven Sharpshooter. Just a card that answers Battle Mage very efficiently. Muzzy can pick up the bump, the preemptive bump, so that way he doesn't lose his Battle Mage for absolutely nothing. And Monsanto has a pretty reasonable curve. Does have the ability to wipe off this board in a couple different ways, but with the coin, he does have the ability to nicely smoothen out the gaps between his cards' mana costs here. Looking at potentially taking a little bit of a defensive stance here, like not necessarily try to develop super aggressively. He is, though. Okay, so he goes for the Desert Spear to go for a full clear. But it's not like Muzzy was going to be super far ahead on board anyways.
No, but this still does fit the curve, as you mentioned. The Og Merchant could be used as removal, I suppose, going to the next turn. And he still has the Dwarven Sharpshooter to be able to use for hero power. Ooh, Scavenger's Ingenuity. One thing I found funny over the past couple of days is just watching the players' reactions to like playing their shaman decks. Like Gallon yesterday was probably the funniest, watching him play his totem shaman deck. But even just like when players look at their hands and realize that, oh my gosh, I'm so far behind, it's only turn 3 or turn 4. It's just been quite entertaining.
Yeah, I think it's because these decks have been built so narrow, as in they have to be very good at being like aggressive, for example, or Eddie's deck has to be very good at being defensive. But because of that, it's kind of led to an interesting dynamic where they're too all in on a strategy. They're really bad at coming back onto the board because they're like so focused on being proactive.
Yeah.
The exception, of course, being that Muzzy seems to have tech like that in his deck, right? He has the Lurker below and 2 Wasteborns to try to target the Druid. But outside of that, it's like try your best to develop as proactively as possible. Scary moment here for Muzzy as well. He's trying to go for this Bogspine Knuckle situation. Has double Corsairs, but there is a Dragonbane waiting on the other side.
Oh, well, I mean, he doesn't really have a choice but to go for it. I feel, because the longer he leaves this Dragonbane on board without trying to contest it with minions, the more damage he's going to take. Like, sure, he could try and hold on to it until Mogu Fleshshaper could become active with both of those minions. Like, you know, play the Bogspine Knuckles this turn and don't attack.
Right, so you can play Bogspine Knuckles, not attack. Next turn, play double Dread Corsair and Lurker below. And try to clear off. But I think that's just too much greed.
Yeah.
Could also find something that would have high impact here. Wow!
Whoa!
Convincing Infiltrator? That's annoying to deal with, although he finds the Maiev.
The Raspike Brute is actually also very annoying to deal with. Every time it's attacked, it deals 1 damage to all enemies.
Right, that's a Demon Hunter card.
Yeah, it's a Demon Hunter card, and whenever it gets played by Demon Hunters, it's super annoying. It's not played very often because, you know, the power level of the rest of their cards is just really high. But Monsanto right now, like, his way to deal with this stuff is to have a lot of miniature attacks into it. And so those are just 2 very annoying minions. Muzzy, and it just goes to show you that he doesn't even have to, you know, feel pressure to use his mutate to try and re-roll one of these into a 6. He's just happy with the result thus far. Okay. Well, that's something.
I moves quickly.
All right, Dragonbane goes down. That is one of the points of concern, and okay, Shield of Galakron comes into play.
I mean, again, it's something, right?
Yeah.
It's something to do.
I think the Lurker below would have been a much worse alternative, so we shall take it.
Let's see what's in the box this time. Ooh, Dragoncaster.
Oh, funny interaction that the Fleshing Ghoul actually activates the moment you kill something, even though you evolved it just then.
Yeah.
The Swarm of Locust clears everything, though.
Oh, it's clean. It's so clean.
Very clean. And sets up for a Siamat. And then the Shamans kind of like dumped a bunch of resources for not much gain here.
Muzzy's been getting very greedy with this mutate. He's been trying to hold on to it for Mogu Fleshshaper.
Right.
But, like, imagine if he rerolls that Dragoncaster that turned into a 7-drop.
Right.
Maybe it's out of range of the Swarm of Locusts, and he has at least some semblance of board. Because also at the same time, like, the Lurker Below and Mogu Fleshshaper have anti-synergy. Because usually Lurker Below is used to clear off wide boards from your opponent, where Mogu Fleshshaper benefits from having a wide board from your opponent.
Yep. I definitely on your side, TJ. Is his Galakron fully invoked? It doesn't look to be the case. He finds another Shield of Galakron. which I believe would put him only at 3. He's played Devoted Maniac, and he's played a Shield of Galakron, if I recall correctly.
I don't even know if he's played a Devoted Maniac.
Oh, no,
I
that
don't
was
think
previous
so.
game.
Yeah,
right.
So this is it. It's just the 2 Shield of Galakron, so it's only the second in both.
And we're rapidly approaching the point where, like, Highlander Hunter has given the Shaman enough time. It's starting to draw, like, the power part of its curve. And now is the opportunity to potentially press in here. Like, the Maiev Shadow Song with the Corrosive Breath and attack is 11 damage, and you do set up a 2-turn lethal that way. Oh yeah? Waste Warden here. That also works.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep. This is a cleaner mana setup and also slightly more power, so I like it. Well done. And now Muzzy has to go for the Galakron, it feels like. Unless I'm missing something.
I mean, Lurker Below leaves the Tiamat up, so he could get greedy and go for Farsight, and then at the worst case scenario, play the Lurker Below. But yeah, this is just way safer, just to make sure that the board is clear. But Monsanto has so much reload behind this. He's got Dragon Queen Alexstrasza into the Grand Slam.
Ooh, oh, wow. Twin Tyrant just to get board presence and to destroy the minion that's on the board. And Monsanto picks up a couple of interesting options. And those don't remove like the best stats. Rottenness Drake is the best tempo if he had a dragon in hand, which he does not if he plays his Twin Tyrant. And then Cobalt Spellkin, of course, more for like the resource generation. Hunter's spells aren't particularly impressive. There's a couple of that are obviously great, but Twin Tyrant here probably just the best option despite having Rottenness Drake in hand. To add insult to injury, Mogu Flesh Shaper is still unplayable here.
Yeah, and Mutate's still stuck.
I guess unplayable is harsh of a description. Mogu Flesh Shaper is very playable this turn. It's just doesn't feel like you get the ideal setup whatsoever. Okay, so Waste Warden deals 3 damage to each dragon.
Nice!
He doesn't have enough for Lurker Below either, and that still wouldn't deal enough. So I guess he's going to search one more time with this Farsight. Okay, finds Invocation of Frost.
I mean, he's starting to like piece together something, but it all just seems like too little, too late. Monsanto has like, is it potential lethal Thiago face? No, not quite.
He just has better cards. That's kind of what
yeah.
The quality of his cards are just much higher, and Muzzy tried to hone in on like again a deck that has early tempo and. It doesn't really have it against a Highlander deck that just has a lot of powerful cards in the late game. You can't answer this.
Well, they all went face.
I mean, even if you could answer it, Monsanto has game any damage in hand.
Yep.
Is there any out with the Mogu Flesh Shaper? What if you get the Colossus?
Scrapbeard Colossus, that would block 14 points of damage.
What he doesn't know is that there's a kill command in hand, but that still isn't going to stop him from at least trying.
Yep.
And the Evolve gets a Deathwing. Very strong minion, but not good enough. And that is going to be game number 3 to Monsanto. The Hunter and the Shaman coming through. And what looked like to be the Druid being the weakness of Monsanto's lineup at the very beginning, potentially, of course, Monsanto is now beating up the Shaman. And Monsanto now has to play one of his decks that are vulnerable to Waste Warden. He plays Druid. The Glowfly Swarm gets blown out. If he plays the Paladin, he's Murloc focused, and Waste Warden will destroy that as well.
Yeah, it's going to be a rough spot, but at the same time, like that's dependent on drawing the Waste Warden because Murloc Paladin can run over Shaman. Because Muzzy, his early game, sure, he has like Blazing Battle Mages in his deck, and Sludge Slurper, but that's it. Stormforge Axe might be able to like buy him some time as well, but there's a chance that he just gets run over, and maybe Waste Warden is not enough to come back. So that's if Monsanto decides to play the Paladin. I'm just not sure what's the right choice in this situation because the Waste Warden's making complicated. It seems like the Shaman would just run over Druid. Like every which way I look at it, you have time to set up your big Bogspine Knuckles or... okay, well... Muzzy's not playing like the full Evolve package. He doesn't have the Bogstraw Clacker. He just has the Knuckles and Mutates. But Lurker Blow and Double Waste Warden, like if you build a board, it's going to get removed, most likely. So that's a tough decision.
Yeah, so I think that if you're Muzz, you once again just kind of see if you can get the Shaman through, and Monsanto maybe just debating if you want Paladin or Druid here. I think the Druid is still higher power level because Waste Warden isn't everything against the Soul of the Forest builds. And so we're going to go into game number 4. However, Muzzy's going to pivot off of the Shaman and instead go into his Mage. Highlander Mage making the first appearance of the weekend. Muzzy just doesn't have faith in the Shaman anymore.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think that's actually just the reality. He's like,
yeah,
okay,
I guess,
sucks.
but like, it seemed like he built his deck specifically to deal with the 2 decks that Monsanto has left up.
It's true.
Like Murloc Paladin and Druid are why you play Double Waste Warden Lurker Below in the Shaman deck.
Well, I mean, Mage seems to be well outfitted to beat the Druid too. Things like this Waste Warden and the Flame Ward.
Yeah.
And of course, everyone's favorite puzzle box of Yogg-Saron.
Oh yeah. But I guess the Mage does have all those tools as well. So
Muzzy has the opportunity to get onto the board with a coin play here. A coin into the Twilight Drake or the Bone Wraith. You can convince me of either. There's 8 cards in hand, so a coin, Twilight Drake, be a 4/7. That's pretty resilient against most of what Druid removes, or Druid's removal.
Oh yeah.
And you know that your opponent's probably going to roll into a Overgrowth turn, because he kept that card. But I guess Muzzy highly values the ability to coin as a slightly faster puzzle box or things of that sort. Finds the Dragon Caster, so he can puzzle box as soon as next turn.
Monsanto has the curve too. He's got the Glowfly Swarm into Innervate Soul of the Forest, into Gift of the Wild.
Holy smokes, we might see a very fast conclusion to this game one way or another.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
So I guess, well, he does have the Waste Warden and the Flame Ward, right?
Yeah. So that checks this board sometimes. But Gift of the Wild, you can see, is there. But Monsanto will be essentially out of just reload after that. And also, because this Bone Wraith is there, he gets to make some trades, which means that Flame Ward is going to clear up many of these.
Right. And Monsanto knows that that should be Flame Ward because Muzzy doesn't have that many secrets. It's a Highlander deck. He's got Flame Ward and Ice Barrier, and that's it.
Yeah, they're both up right now, so...
It's sort of a tough situation here for Monsanto because everything he does leads to his board getting significantly weaker, and he's pretty all in on this. Does have a chance to get bailed out if he picks up Overflow off the top of the deck. You can also choose to not attack. He knows the Ice Barrier is up as well, so it negates like the other 2 attacks from these tree ants. Instead, he could like wait for a potential Power of the Wild, or he doesn't have a second Soul of the Forest. This is bad spot for Monsanto. Oh jeez. Now, alternatively, Muzzy can go just for the puzzle box.
Oh, here we go. Let's see what's in the box. All right, rough start.
Okay.
There's still time.
Still not that great. Oh,
right.
Swipe. Swipe is great.
Nailed it.
It's everything.
Starfall. It wasn't the AoE.
There's Mark. Just reducing. Oh, boy. They unleashed the hounds.
Oh!
Libra
Oh my gosh.
Clean up this mess.
I concede.
And that will be a concede. Monsanto recognizing that he can't do anything. Muzzy with the thumbs up. And we kind of knew that this game was sort of doomed anyways for Monsanto because that Flame Ward just kept like his entire board in check. And Muzzy had like plenty of ways to even just like piece together removal because he could like Ray of Frost one thing, ping another thing. Like Monsanto was just stuck. So the puzzle box just like completely cemented the lead there. Muzzy was very far ahead, and I mean, we kind of expected that to go that way.
Yep.
Now we get ready for game number 5. Once more, will Muzzy turn to the Shaman? Or perhaps TJ, he will show us the ways of his Druid.
No,
but
Shaman.
I feel like that creates a situation where you're either 50-50 against the Druid, because you're playing Druid Mirror, or you're unfavored versus Murloc Paladin, the deck that is the king of the meta, TJ. We talked about it for weeks, hyping it up. Murloc Paladin, statistically, just the best deck against your average ladder player. I should probably add that caveat.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
It was like one of those things where, so people who don't know, the first 2 weeks, whenever TJ and I would like pull up like HS Replay or other data sites, it would just show that like Murloc Paladin was overperforming against everything.
Yep.
It was like 54% win rate. And it's like its only bad matchup was like Control Warrior. Maybe, you know? It's just like, why are these stats like so heavily skewed towards making Murloc Paladin look so good? And obviously it's because it wasn't refined data. It was like taking every region across all ranks. It was just funny to see, though, whenever it would be like, well, what's a good counter for things like the Galakron Rogue or the Zoo Warlock stuff or whatnot. It's like Murloc Paladin kept showing up in every single one of those data pools.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I look at the updated data, and Murloc Paladin is moving down the ladder a little bit. Its success and its popularity. It loses to every archetype of Demon Hunter and Highlander Mage. Those are its bad matchups. Oh, and most archetypes of Warrior. But that's it. Everything else it's supposed to beat. In fact, it's supposed to beat Spell Druid about 70% of the time.
Well,
it's supposed to beat Galakron Shaman only 53% of the time. So,
yeah, but like, how many games do we have?
250 across all ranks. So not very many.
Not many. Usually you want to get to around 1,000 before you can start drawing conclusions.
And they don't have Waste Wardens, these ladder lists. So you can probably put that a little higher for the Galakron Shaman.
No 2-drop. Wow, this is a really big deal here for Monsanto, and Muzzy could use this opportunity to get ahead. Although with these double Cold Light Seers, could also potentially be a very big board out of nowhere that Muzzy can't recover from.
Yeah. Because the Dormant Minion will activate before on Monsanto's start of next turn, and then he gets to Cold Light Seer and potentially dodge everything that's going to happen here. And Muzzy pretty much is going to need Waste Warden on 5.
Right, that's why he kept his mana flexible.
But the second Cold Light Seer is going to come down before he's able to play it.
second Coalesce here comes down, but there's still not that much power, and he can remove one Murloc on the board, which I think is a good call. Because he knows that there's a possibility of a second Coalesce here. And honestly, a second Coalesce here is not that great. It's annoying, but like it's still just like minimal power. But what really hurts is the War Leader follow-up. It's still the Waste Warden here, just to remove some power on the board.
I'm not 100% sold on the Waste Warden yet.
Okay, and the alternative is to equip a weapon. Yeah, equip a weapon. It could be Knuckles or the Stormforge Axe, either one. And then try to weaken it.
Because Monsanto he's going to keep playing Murlocs. That's
true.
Happen.
That's true. This is not the Highlander Paladin that only plays a few Murlocs.
And Monsanto stops at the at 4. He does not have the Scale Lord, so there's no Scale Lord to punish. And the only Murlocs that are not susceptible to Waste Warden on the following turn would be Felfin Navigator and something with Divine Shield. So Murgurgle. So like he could set up like a weapon and then hold the Waste Warden until the following turn, and then Waste Warden and get more value, and maybe be able to clean up the rest of the Murlocs as well. Because now he just doesn't have Waste Warden anymore, and now he's going to have to start hitting these mini weapon swings into Murlocs and then hope that gets the job done. And I just don't see that happening. Unless he draws second Waste Warden, because he does have 2 in the deck. He can also draw Lurker below.
Yeah, he has Lurker below, he has the Waste Wardens, and honestly, things like not Corrupt Elementalist. Corrupt Elementalist is nice, but even a Devoted Maniac would be pretty solid against this board. He has a lot of good draws, finds one of the worst.
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah, he's going to do his best to try to fight back on the following turns. And Monsanto finds Hungry Crab, but
Tempo! The best use of this is probably in combination with the Hench Clan Hogsteed.
Right. I think I would probably swing with the weapon first, just to see if you can completely blow Muzzy out of the game with another Cold Light Seer, because then you play War Leader Cold Light Seer. I'd be afraid of Lurker below from this position.
Yeah.
But perhaps Monsanto doesn't have the luxury of trying to wait for that. Hungry Crab here is also good if you position it in the middle to stop a
Move quickly.
Lurker below. The Lurker below. So you could attack this. Oh, he's going to evolve. Interesting.
He's torn.
Okay.
Well, this is a little bit of mispositioning of the Hungry Crab.
It's a pretty significant mispositioning if he did have the Lurker below.
Yeah. You want to put it directly in the middle.
Yeah, so that way you only can kill away half your board at best. I think Muzzy probably won't be greedy with his Mutate if he finds this to be lacking. Okay, I mean, I think that's pretty bad.
Oh, yeah.
That's much better.
Oh, yeah.
But I think he might be on cleanup duty, or he might just be dead. Hold on. 3, 5, 7, 8, plus 6 is 14, plus Hand of a Doll is 16. All these Murlocs get +2 with the War Leader.
The Hogsteed's a beast.
Oh, wait, I thought it was Murloc for a second, but the Murloc's the Death Rattle minion. You were
He's
correct.
riding it.
He's riding the Hogsteed.
I mean, this is still pretty close to locked up for Monsanto. Muzzy needs exactly
so
Lurker below next turn or Waste Warden, and then still needs some help beyond that, right? Like a Taunt Totem because he wouldn't kill everything.
Yes, or a Sludge Slurper into a Titanic Lackey, and that's starting to just become really, really low odds.
Yeah. It's looking grim still. And if Muzzy loses this game, he would have lost all 3 games this series with Shaman. What's the draw? Looks like a Dread Corsair to me.
Dread Corsair has taunt, which makes it feel like you don't want it to evolve, but you don't really have a choice.
What about 9 mana?
9 mana, there are rushers.
What to do?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it might have to be just like a convincing infiltrator setup again with his Dread Corsair. He could also throw in the Underbelly Angler and try to see if he can go for a 3-mana taunt. And there's a couple of things that might be solid.
The only 9-mana taunt is Pit Commander. The Demon Hunter, at the end of your turn, summon a random demon from your deck.
Yeah. All right, well, final verdict on Muzzy's Game 5. No taunt, a Mogu Flesh Aper. And that's going to do it. Monsanto wins the series 3-2, sweeping Muzzy's Shaman.
Yeah,
Whew,
little bit rough. Yeah, especially with knowing that you've teched specifically for it, and then Waste Warden having it on 5, but it barely does anything to impact the board state. That feels bad, and losing all 3 games in that series with Shaman also feels bad. But I mean, there were some close ones. He gets taunts there. Maybe he finds a way out, like multiple taunts from that evolve. Very slim odds to get a taunt from 9 mana because there's only 1 from the Deathwing. But a good amount at 5 for the Dread Corsair. So, but it was still very slim margins that he had there, and now he'll have to wait to see the fate of PNC versus Saiyan to see who he's going to be facing in that elimination match.
Yeah, Muzzy has... I mean, his deck list was much better against Druid than it was against Murloc Paladin. He didn't have a single Hungry Crab in it, so you could see that those refined strategies to have the Murloc stuff may have probably forced Monsanto to play the Druid, and then he might have been in bigger trouble versus Druid. So it's one of those dangerous things about Open Conquest, which is that you don't have to win with each of your decks. You have to just win 3 games with your decks, period.
Yep. And I wonder what why no Hungry Crabs, but I guess he was just trying to corner Druid. But again, like you mentioned, the opponent could just not play. If you tech for just one thing, your opponent could just not play it, and then you're kind of in a tough spot.
All right, well, that brings us to our next break. So we're going to take a brief intermission, and when we come back, we're going to find out if Muzzy's teammate, Just Saiyan from Radiance, can take on PNC and avoid some kind of team kill in the elimination match. So don't go anywhere. We'll be back in just a moment.
Hearthstone Grandmasters is brought to you by T-Mobile, helping you stay connected to what matters most. Learn about T-Mobile's COVID-19 response on T-Mobile.com.